So here, when we talk about the potential strategy, what they are going to do is they are either going to acquire. That is probably the fastest way of building AI native capabilities overnight, especially if they want to catch up with some of these AI native vendors, or probably build that internally. And again, the only thing they are building is just the agentic layer, and they are hijacking some of the workflows that were done manually traditionally, and that is the only layer that they are building. They are not replacing entire code base. That's where the real distinction is.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Oh, hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining from. And this is our process series is how we are defining this. So we have 2 or 3 different themes of the webinars that we do. So in this particular case, we are going to talk a lot about ERP concepts, processes, methodologies, any sort of trends. So this would fall under the trend webinar, because we are talking about the state of ERP. A couple of things overall from the logistics perspective. If you want to know about future webinars, I think the best way to know would be on our page, which is events and webinar. If you have not subscribed to our newsletter, you might want to do that. That's where we send a lot of announcements if you don't want to miss that. And then I'm going to start with my quick intro, and then Shrestha, you might want to introduce yourself. So Sam Gupta, principal and host of WBS Talks. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP selection advisory firm, and we do a lot of work from the change management perspective, technology, strategy, etc. On that note, Shrestha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. Hello, everyone. My name is Shrestha Das, and I'm working as an industry research analyst at Elevate IQ. And I'm really excited for today's webinar and to see what's there for ERP in 2026.
Perfect. And Shrestha, I know you have been researching a lot. Would love to hear from you what you are finding, what you're hearing in the community. So it's always good to compare notes. Now, if you are in the audience, we always like to hear from you as well. If you don't feel too shy, and if you can introduce yourself, we would love to know who you are. Whatever you want to share, just a little bit. If you are open to sharing your LinkedIn profiles, sometimes people like to network. Do that if you feel comfortable. Now I'm going to start with the session, unless you guys have any comments right now. So we are going to start with a little bit of traditional view, and it's almost shocking. I mean, we are at a point where people are talking about death of ERP, but if you look at the taxonomy alignment of ERP, there's a lot of confusion overall in terms of what an ERP is, what value it brings to the table. So if you look at more from the business value perspective, what was the core value of ERP, why companies implemented an ERP, and every industry is going to have a little bit of different flavor to it. But for the most part, the way I like to think about this, there are 2 layers. Number one is process consolidation, and the second is controlled processes. These were kind of 2 values. If you guys know any other values in your experience, we would love to hear more about that. But from the process consolidation perspective, obviously, companies, when they went for any sort of ERP journey, they were looking for fewer data silos. They had too many data silos, less fragmentation overall from the departmental consolidation perspective. Overall communication, collaboration between departments, when companies had to consolidate. Basically, if they had too many systems, they were running into a lot of different challenges, and that's where the whole value of ERP came along. And then obviously the reconciliation cost is another factor, and that these things are really connected. So if you had too much reconciliation cost, then you would require some sort of ERP. Now, when we are going to talk about the state of ERP and the trends that we are noticing, we are going to touch on these topics in terms of how these things are going to be impacted and what you are going to get out of the newer breed of ERP that we are seeing in the market. The second aspect that we want to touch on is the controlled processes. So obviously the proactive business rules, the cross-functional control, and again, these 4 or 5 different layers are internally connected. So when you are going to have fewer data silos, obviously you are going to have a lot more, cross-functional control, the kind of hierarchy of business rules you are going to have from the ERP perspective that might not be available with the other categories. For example, SaaS, other best of breed systems that we have in the market, they serve great purpose, but they might not have as much cross functional control or consolidation. And again, that was the value of ERP. And again, the reason why some of these ERPs were so difficult is because they imposed a lot of database restrictions. So that's what is sort of changing. Obviously, AI has substantial power value to what AI can do, but they have also taken some of the workarounds. Now, some things are easier from the AI perspective. So we are going to think whether we are going to require these database restrictions in the future ERP category. So that's going to be a thing to watch in the future years. But right now, what we are noticing in the market is the newer categories, the newer systems that we have are very different. The design is very different. So it's going to require very different mindset and very different workflows overall from the system implementation perspective. Now, some of the historical challenges, and obviously these newer categories are claiming that they can overcome these challenges, and that's why they are super popular. But overall, when you look at the ERP implementation, you need to have long-term mindset. If you don't have long-term mindset, for the most part, it was very hard to be successful with these ERP implementations. Now, the newer breeds, what they are arguing is you probably don't require that because implementation is faster. There are things that have become faster from the ERP implementation perspective, but ERP as a category, when you look at the cross-functional consolidation, you still have to invest substantial amount of time with change management. You need to have substantial investment to be able to be successful with ERP systems even today, even with the newer categories. So we have one comment. Hello, hey, I think Perman, you are joining from Switzerland. Thank you so much for joining. And if you guys want to post your locations, we would love to know that. The second challenge that we have had overall from the ERP category perspective is they required substantial skill set upgrade, and that was given for the most part if the users did not have ERP background or they did not have experience with the ERP centric processes that generally had much higher lift overall from the skill set perspective. And that's what prevented a lot of organizations. And sometimes, I mean, they managed with SaaS, sometimes spreadsheet, depending upon how big they are and depending upon the process maturity as well. But overall, when you look at the ERP category, you do need a skill set upgrade. Now, things might change a little bit from the AI native perspective because now we have the conversational interfaces. So that's what we are going to touch in a second. Now, you need to change your processes because obviously, if you don't change your processes, some of the systems require that. And if you don't do that, then obviously you are going to get into the customization rabbit hole. And those were some of the challenges in the industry. Now, do you need that in the newer category or not? That's going to be a question. Longer implementation cycles. That was another challenge that we had from the ERP perspective. The implementation cycles may be shorter from the technical implementation perspective, but the challenges associated with change management are probably still going to be the same. Overall category alignment, even today, I think there is a lot of confusion in terms of what an ERP is and what should be an ERP, what should be the scope of an ERP. Those challenges are still there. And with AI native categories, I think that is probably going to be even more. I have some comment or question here, so I'll touch on this one. So James, thank you so much for joining. So James is asking, okay, are there slides? I'm just seeing one slide. Yes, I'm just talking about this slide right now. So I'll move to the next one. Hopefully that's okay. So this one, historical challenges that we are talking about. Obviously, the ERPs were limited to the current transactional data. Now, again, with AI native categories, that boundary is being blurred at this point of time. They are able to get a lot more data from the historical perspective as well. So, overall, I think the definition of ERP is going to change and the scope of ERP is going to change as well. Now, how effective these ERP systems are going to be or newer categories are going to be, that's going to be a question once we have enough use cases that we have seen from the implementation adoption perspective. And there were obviously barriers to effective data retrieval. I think this was one of the biggest challenge from the ERP perspective, as well as user training. That was also another challenge that we had. So James, I'm moving to the next slide right now. Obviously, I'll be spending a lot more time. I don't have a lot of slides, just few. So we will be touching a lot more, I guess, on each of these slides. So when you look at the landscape of ERP, so I have one more question here. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, James. So here, I guess, when you look at the landscape and what is driving these expectations. So, overall, when you look at a lot of different SaaS categories, and again, this is going to come from the investors because they drive the behavior, they drive a lot of different things. So, wherever they are going to invest money is going to drive how the market is going to evolve. So, obviously, if you look at the last 5 or 10 years, there has been a substantial influx of the SaaS applications. And the reason for that is because the sales process was easier from the investment perspective. The implementation process was easier as well. Whether they got the business results, business value, that's going to be a question. But at least from the sales perspective as well as from the implementation perspective, the SaaS categories were easier. That's why we saw a lot more, SaaS applications penetrated. I would say, after cloud became mainstream somewhere in 2015, and that's when we have seen a lot more SaaS categories pop up. And obviously, these are slightly more disconnected categories. They are not necessarily ERP. Some were slightly more consolidated. They are not the exact ERP, the kind of ERP systems that ERP consultants would like to see or ERP practitioners would like to see. So overall, SaaS has reset the user expectations. These applications were far easier. The kind of experience they provided was very different, and that's what is driving what people expect in the ERP category, in the ERP system. Now, the other advantage that we had with SaaS application is that the workflows were not as constraining. ERPs were far more difficult, obviously, and that's why people preferred the SaaS applications. Sometimes they just didn't know what they are going to get from the ERP perspective. That's why they didn't want to get into these longer implementations. And obviously, the business users struggled to realize the need for ERP-centric workflows as well. It's very, very, very hard to communicate in general what value ERP is going to bring to the table unless somebody has transformed a business from the ERP perspective. They won't get the value. They won't get why they need to invest this in long term and what value they are going to get. And obviously, economy plays a big role in all of this. When you are not going to have revenue certainty, then no executives are going to have any sort of appetite for long-term projects. So obviously, that is driving a lot of these things in the last 5 or 10 years. Investors look at pretty much everything. They are generally looking at very short time horizon. Generally, that is 5 to 10 years, and they need to make money in that time frame. And if you look at last 5-10 years, we have had continued revenue uncertainty, and that is probably going to continue in the future years as well, at least for the next 3-4 years. And from the business perspective, now these things are moving very fast, so they are looking for a lot of agility. And again, that's what is driving the ERP space. Overall R&D, the design philosophy, investment, everything. Now, if you look at the product design as well as the category constraints, generally, when you look at the natural gaps and the way business and users like to see their systems, obviously they are going to have a little bit training required for their workflows, and if they don't have that, they won't be able to relate with the ERP workflows. And that is the traditional challenge that the ERP industry has had. So generally, when you look at the ERP category, that was the problem, and now the newer categories are trying to attack that. Okay, how can I tailor that experience for the users the way they like to see their natural gaps filled? So again, that is another philosophy that is driving the current design, as well as the ERP product category, the newer systems. Overall challenges with data migration, I think that was the traditional challenge, and that is driving the ERP landscape as well. And some of the behavioral issues. So overall uncertainty with business models. Now overall, when you look at the AI native business models, and I'm not talking about just from the software perspective, I'm talking about the real workflows, the business models. When you look at manufacturers, retailers, not for profit, public sector, all of these industries are going to change substantially because they are going to have agentic workflows. A lot of processes that were done manually will be handled by agents. So that changes the whole game for the ERP as well. Right now, we are at a very early stage at this point of time, how these processes are going to evolve. Businesses don't necessarily understand, how to rewire their business models, how their products and services are going to change because of AI, but that is going to drive the design as well as the landscape as well. Overall, companies have had sort of the limited expertise with the process and architectural alignment. So some of the integration issues also drove the landscape, and that's what vendors are trying to attack in terms of the opportunities, what they are seeing in the market, how users are behaving, how companies are behaving, and their design is influenced by that. Obviously, technology advancement is a big pillar here. So when you talk about the AI, there is a real value, real power behind AI technology. So obviously, they are trying to capitalize on that. Now, when you look at interactions such as your debugging workflows, they are going to change completely. Data analysis, the way we retrieved data, the way we interacted with ERP applications, that is going to change completely. Configuration, implementation, how we did implementation is going to change completely. So these are different changes that are influencing the ERP market at this point of time. So now I'm going to move to the next slide, and we are going to talk about how vendors, each of the vendors are approaching. So we have bucketed this into 3 or 4 different categories of different vendors. There are some examples here of each of the vendor categories. So we have on-prem vendors, and sometimes on-prem vendors might not like to call them on-prem, but we are defining on-prem meaning you started in the on-prem world, not necessarily in the cloud native world, and you still have substantial on-prem base. You are still selling as the on-prem license. You may not have as much cloud footprint or cloud strategy. You might have some strategy, but you may not have completely rewired your business model. So those would be some of the on-prem vendors. In that category, some examples would be SAP ECC, JD Edwards. There is no clear direction for these products, whether they are going to be sunset. We don't know at this point of time. And that's why we are calling these as more of the on-prem vendors and not necessarily cloud migrated vendors. Then we have the cloud migrated vendors, meaning they have invested substantially either in the cloud native architecture or relatively cloud native architecture, depending upon how you want to define that. So and their strategy is going to be to sell as much cloud as possible. We have seen some abrupt announcements with some vendors. For example, Epicor Kinetic recently announced that they are not going to support any of their on-prem workload, and our expectation would be that other vendors are going to follow that, because it's going to be very hard to maintain more code bases from the AI perspective. And if they are really investing substantially from the AI perspective, then the only code base they are going to support is probably cloud. So a lot of these on-prem code bases will receive end of life, if not today, then maybe in the future years. So some of the cloud migrated vendors are going to be Info Cloud Suite, Epicor Kinetic, IFS, and Dalmia Works, which is the IQMS product. And then we had the newer breed of products that popped up somewhere around 2015, which is your Acumatica, NetSuite, Sage Intacct. Rootstock would probably fall under the cloud native category as well. They are relatively new in the market as well. And then you have some of the business suites, and business suites are going to be Odoo's of the world. Now, Odoo could be ERP. I mean, they do have ERP workflows. Those workflows might not be as sophisticated, as rich as some other systems that we have or vendors we have. But Odoo is a real ERP, but it can also be deployed as disconnected workflows, meaning without an ERP. And when you have that kind of design, when you are offering that kind of flexibility, then generally you are not going to have as tight processes from the ERP perspective. And that's where we feel that they are not as a real ERP as some of the other vendors that we have on the list. And generally, what they were trying to do is they were trying to attack the accounting market for the most part. They had complete functionality from the business suite perspective. They had a lot of different modules, but those modules were not as interconnected. The business rules did not have as deep hierarchies, or data layers were not as relational as they need to be from the ERP workflow perspective. So the examples of that would be something like Odoo, Zoho, Sin7. And again, it's probably not a fair comparison of Odoo versus Zoho and Sin7. Zoho and Sin7 still have disconnected accounting. Odoo probably have connected accounting. But other ones that we have on this list are probably going to have disconnected accounting workflows. They generally have dependency on the external accounting engine. They might not have as deep or intertwined account workflows built as part of their processes. So again, the examples of those would be Zoho, Sin7, Katana, Fulcrum, ProShop, Total ETO, and there are probably 1,000 different other products in this category. So when you look at the current state of on-prem vendors, still today, even though we have substantial momentum from the AI native perspective, on-prem vendors still have substantial installed base, and they are facing challenges with migration. And that's why they need to figure out, okay, how can we migrate these install bases to the newer, software, newer, platforms. But customers are not willing to do that because the flexibility that they have had from the on-prem install base perspective, that is still not available with the cloud migrated install base or cloud native, install base. Obviously, AI native is a very, very, very new category right now, so they are not going to have the same amount of maturity. Now, when you look at the cloud migrated, vendors, so they have a lot more functional maturity, I would say, operational maturity compared to other categories. For example, cloud native or AI native, but they are not going to be as deep as on-prem. They are not going to be as flexible as on-prem. So whatever constraints that you had from the cloud perspective are probably going to exist with the cloud migrated categories as well. But the legacy layers that they are not completely rewritten. So there are going to be some challenges. They are not going to be completely cloud native experience. So that's why they are called a little bit of cloud migrated. I don't know if they are going to be completely re-architected on the cloud native architecture, but that is something we'll find out. But now I think companies are able to manage that using AI native workflows a lot better. They don't have the same challenges that they had in the cloud native world. And when you look at the cloud native vendors, it's still very lean. They just don't have the same operational maturity that their cloud migrated or on-prem vendors had. And it's very hard to compete for them with these other functionally mature products. Obviously, they have marketplaces, ecosystem, add-ons that can be augmented, but still they are very lean at this point of time. And then obviously you have the business suites, and those are going to be again, the Sin7 Katanas of the world. They are very different category. Some people might argue that they are not necessarily ERP, but obviously from the marketing perspective, they all position themselves as an ERP. Even the accounting systems, they all position themselves as an ERP. So what is the strategy that they are taking? So if you look at the on-prem vendors, they have a couple of options. Number one, what they are going to do is they are going to acquire just a AI native layer, and a lot of cloud migrated vendors had done this as well. What they had done is they had acquired some of the BI layers to overcome the objections that they got from the cloud native vendors. And during the demo, the only thing you are going to see is the BI layer. You are not going to see the actual workflow, the traditional the layers where your core processes resided. So that's how they sort of overcame these objections during the sales process. And this is the same strategy that some of these on-prem vendors are taking. And it's going to be much easier in the AI native world because the core layers don't play the same role anymore in the newer architecture. The agentic layer is far more powerful. So from their perspective, they are going to have much easier life than what they had to face, in the cloud native days. So here, when we talk about the potential strategy, what they are going to do is they are either going to acquire. That is probably the fastest way of building AI native capabilities overnight, especially if they want to catch up with some of these AI native vendors, or probably build that internally. And again, the only thing they are building is just the agentic layer, and they are hijacking some of the workflows that were done manually traditionally, and that is the only layer that they are building. They are not replacing entire code base. That's where the real distinction is. Cloud migrated vendors are probably going to take very similar strategy, and it's sort of unfortunate for them because they had invested substantially, I would say, in the cloud migrated world. But now that code base is not going to be as useful, because now you have to translate all of that into the AI native workflows, and they all are going to follow very similar strategy. So in our mind, when we look at on-prem vendors as well as cloud migrated vendors, they are probably going to have very similar strategy overall, how they are going to plan their migration. So if you're a buyer, then you need to pay attention to what you are seeing. Are you seeing a simple AI native layer? That could be a possibility. Or they might not show that during the demo. So that's where you need to go deeper into your assessment. What exactly is AI native? Is the complete product AI native, or is it just one layer that they are trying to show during the demo? Now, when you look at cloud native vendors, even they are going to face very similar challenges because translating even the cloud native architecture is not as easy. Our hope was that that would be easier, but it's not going to be as easy. So right now, if you really think about it, cloud native vendors were really ahead, I would say, in the game overall from the technology capabilities perspective. But now they are probably going to be as behind as on-prem or cloud migrated vendors because they have very, very, very similar challenges. But at least their workloads were far more decoupled. They did not have as much dependency on customers. Their customers, I would say, over-engineered workflows, any sort of custom development. So they don't have those challenges, at least from the code-based perspective. Now we have the business suites, and business suites are probably going to be the easiest to translate into AI native world because their database layers are not as connected. It's not as intertwined. They don't have the same challenges that other ERP vendors are going to face. So if you look at the market disruption, I would say it's going to be really challenging for on-prem vendors or for AI native vendors to penetrate the market of on-prem vendors, just because the kind of workaround that they have taken, the kind of design philosophy that they are following. It's still very early to predict how the ERP space is going to evolve. Whether ERP layers, the intertwined layers that we always had from the process consolidation perspective, whether that is going to be relevant in the future or not, just because the data extraction is far easier. So it's still very early to forecast that. But for them, I think it's going to be really difficult to penetrate the market share of on-prem vendors. It is still going to be difficult for them to penetrate the market of cloud migrated vendors as well, just because these workloads, the way the hierarchies are, the way the business rules are, they are far more connected, and the database design that AI native systems have, it'll be really challenging for them to overcome that, at least from our perspective. Now, when you look at cloud native vendors, even cloud native vendors are going to be harder to penetrate based on the relational data model that they have. So all of these three categories are going to be equally challenging for AI native vendors. But right now, if you look at the market disruption, they have penetrated, I would say, business suites or cloud native vendors, not necessarily cloud migrated or on-prem vendors at this point of time. Some companies may be migrating from on-prem and they might be excited about AI. They may have moved, especially in the services industry, to AI native platforms. But again, it's very early at this point of time. But business suites, we would think that that is probably going to be one category that is going to experience the biggest challenge. Maybe they are going to translate their entire code base into the AI native world, and it's probably going to be really easy for them to do that. So that is probably going to be one of the category which is going to be really disrupted. Okay, so some more, things from what's driving the change, I guess. So one thing that is driving the change is obviously you have the AI gold rush, and there are at least 1,000 companies that have popped up, I would say, in last 3 to 6 months, and they all are rethinking their business models. They feel that AI native is probably going to be a category across business models, across industries. So the whole AI gold rush is driving that. Again, investors drive this. This is not in anybody's control. Wherever the money is going to be invested, that's what is going to define the market. So this is going to be one of the reasons why the markets are being redefined and why ERP processes would be redefined as well. Okay, obviously the investors and competitive pressures. So this is coming from portfolio strategy, and this is also a factor. Whatever other private equity companies are going to do, others are simply going to follow, and then you have the entire industry market. So obviously that defines this a lot as well. Every single company, they are going to look at their competitors, whatever they are doing, they are probably going to follow that. Whether it is going to be some sort of augmentation to the real products or services, and we are talking about the real product manufactured products, retail products that are being sold. We are talking about that. So AI is going to be infused with that. AI is going to be infused with the products as well as processes, and that is going to redefine business processes as well as architecture. Obviously, macro trends is a big factor. Whatever we have faced in the last 5-6 years, which is going to continue for the next 3-4 years as well, that is also driving the market. And speed of development is more of the technology factor. So just because AI is providing a lot, so the traditional constraints or the problems that we had from the ERP implementation configuration development perspective, they are no longer relevant. So that's where we are going to see a lot more changes. And then AI-driven automation from the integration perspective, overall, the agentic workflows that you are going to see in the market, they are going to completely rewire the business models. So it's going to be interesting to watch how the next few years are going to unfold, but we are going to see a lot of changes. And obviously, that is going to define the state of ERP systems as well as vendors. Okay, so some more comments on how vendors are responding to AI native threats. So some vendors are simply have taken the marketing path, which is always the easiest. They have converted everything into AI native, AI powered, AI augmented, whatever terms they could use. They have not made any sort of changes. And this is very common with a lot of different private equity companies. They acquire traditional code bases and they generally don't invest anything in R&D or product. The only thing they are going to do is they are simply going to remarket, rebrand everything from the AI native perspective, and then going to call themselves as AI native, AI powered, but obviously they are not that. So that's where you need to be slightly more informed in assessing. When you look at AI native, obviously there is a lot of noise in the market at this point of time. So how you can look deeper, how you can assess these platforms, whether they are really positioned for that R&D, whether they are going to have that budget, whether they are going to have their ecosystems that are going to be flexible enough to sustain this change. Then now the second strategy that they are taking is again, developing or procuring some sort of orchestration layers. And orchestration layer, when you look at the role of that, traditionally speaking, that did not belong to ERP. For the most part, the orchestration layer belonged to human workflows, manual workflows. So this is going to be a new introduction, from the process perspective. So that's what a lot of legacy vendors are doing, because there is no way they can translate their code base, within 2-3 months. Things are much easier for the AI native vendors, and the reason why they are easy is because they don't have to please their existing install base. They don't have the same constraints from the legacy existing install base as the existing vendors. So it's not a complete rewrite. So that's where you need to pay attention, and you need to have a little bit technical background, or somebody who has technical background on your side, to be able to assess these things. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard for people to understand, okay, what is AI native, what is not AI native. And our expectation is that we are going to see a lot more investments in AI native categories, and other categories are probably going to go end of life, just because they are not going to get attention from the investors' perspective. And obviously, future is going to be some sort of acquiring AI native vendors. And that is, we have 4 or 5 major AI native vendors at this point of time in the market. Again, we don't know their place where they will land. They are doing wonderfully well, at least in the service-centric industries. I would say slightly more accounting-centric workflows, but most of the established vendors, they will end up acquiring one of these cloud native vendors, just the way they did that for the cloud native vendors as well. You talk about NetSuite, Acumatica, Sagentech, etc. So those all were acquired by major enterprise software vendors. So that would be our expectation, that AI native vendors, and the names of those are going to be Dual Entry, Everest, Campfire, which one am I missing here? And Relate are going to be 4 major AI native vendors that we have in the market. So the next slide that we have is what are AI native platforms, what they can do and what they are not capable of. Sometimes their capabilities might be overstated. So here, what's possible from the technology perspective? So if you talk about the conversational information retrieval, and I like to compare this with Monday.com, Smartsheet, as well as Airtable, those 3 vendors as well as categories. And the reason why I like to compare it with them is because they created something which was very unique. Obviously, they are very well positioned in the market in terms of their category, what they are doing and where they are fit. But overall, what they removed is they removed all of those database rules. But what they were able to do is they were able to retrieve data by connecting a lot of different spreadsheets or pivot tables, the way your experience would be inside a spreadsheet. So that's what they have done. And now that is possible using AI native categories as well. AI native platforms, this is the similar mindset philosophy that they have followed, just because the conversational information retrieval is going to be much easier in the AI native categories. If you have used any of those, you are going to feel that I don't want any of the legacy vendors, ERPs, because it's so easy to use these platforms. Also, from the implementation budget perspective, traditionally, when you look at any of the ERP implementations, the majority of the consulting effort that went in, it was really into that information retrieval. Majority of the consulting companies, they invested a lot of effort in building these reports. Just building one report could take anywhere from $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, just one report. And now that you can retrieve within a fraction of seconds. So that's the kind of power that we are talking about with these newer platforms. So some things are possible because of the technology, but they have also taken some workarounds, which is where our concern is a little bit in terms of the replacement of category. So the existing vendors and solutions are still going to be relevant in the new world. When you look at the customization, the software development is where the real power is of the newer platforms. They are able to customize these platforms at a light speed. And sometimes when you look at the AI native categories, some people have compared them with low code, no code platforms, just because now you don't need developers to be able to develop these workflows. Even business users can do that. So but obviously, when you do that, you are not going to have the target model that you have to design. You have to still define the spec. You have to figure out, okay, what you are going to do with that code. So you can create code very fast, but again, the definition of a state is where the major challenges are going to be. But you can experiment a lot faster. You can build these customizations a lot faster. So some of the constraints that we have from the ERP perspective are not going to be relevant anymore in the new world. Now, integration is another area which is moving at a light speed at this point of time. If you look at some of the traditional vendors, for example, Cispro, they have created a very similar ecosystem as, for example, let's say if you compare this with NetSuite or Acumatica, they had one of the richest ecosystem, I would say, in terms of the vendors that they had in their marketplace. And the reason why they could do that is because they had invested a lot in the partner development, as well as these partners had developed substantial IP from the integration perspective. Now, the prescriptive vendors did not have the same attention from the ISVs, from the software platforms, so their marketplaces were relatively leaner. But now, with the AI native categories, especially if you look at the iPaaS category, through that iPaaS category, the AI native one, you can integrate much faster, meaning overnight you can create thousands and thousands of integrations very easily. So now the traditional vendors are going to have much richer marketplaces. That's number one. The acquisition strategy is going to be much faster, and some vendors are already doing that just because integration is much easier. It does not require as much investment. It does not require the same amount of effort from the integration perspective. So your procurement cycle is going to be much easier as well. And now when you are going to compare this with AI native vendors, they are going to claim, hey, I have got 30,000 integrations. And sometimes you are going to wonder within 2 months, how did he get that? So that's the power that we are talking about. But again, some things are really powerful. Other places, they have taken some shortcuts, and that's why they are able to move this fast. And we'll talk about some of those shortcuts just in a second. Faster data migration, they are able to migrate data faster as well, just because they have removed a lot of those rules. The kind of hierarchies that ERPs were known for, they have removed all of that. They have removed a lot of mandatory fields as well. And again, you are going to have a lot of different data integrity issues. Now, whether people are going to care for data integrity in the future or not is going to be a question, because of the conversational informational retrieval, the trend that we are talking about, you are able to retrieve the information faster. You are able to correct much faster as well. You have automated workflows that can correct these data issues as well. So do you need data integrity? It's going to be a question. Okay, so what we are looking at from the AI native category perspective is similar experience as QuickBooks. And obviously, everybody loved QuickBooks for the ease of use. They might not like it from the data integrity perspective, but now these things are going to be much easier in the newer model. Some workflow like logic might shift to agentic layer. So agentic layers are going to be combination of some workflows from the ERP perspective plus the manual or the human workflows, and that's what is going to define the agentic layer. But these are going to be real workflow, the kind of workflows that were done by humans. Now the agents are going to do that, and obviously they are going to have a persona, some sort of role security that is going to be developed as part of these ERP systems. So again, you are changing the whole security architecture of these ERP systems as well. And continuous workflow. So some vendors are arguing that, whatever you did from the ERP implementation perspective before, that you need to really know about your processes, data, you need to define your state. If you don't do that, then your changes are going to be much harder. You may experience implementation failures. But now what these agents can do is they can learn real time. So they can also change some of the configuration parameters that define the ERP state. So things are going to be much easier overall. I guess from the continuous improvement perspective as well, it might not require as much consulting effort. But again, it's very early to predict at this point of time. And where we see the real value of these AI native categories is going to be in autonomous macro planning. So we have always divided the ERP versus sort of the planning category into two different categories. So when you look at ERP is really known for those transactional workloads, processing transactions. That's where the real power of ERP systems is. If you look at slightly more macro planning, that's where your category is going to be, for example, your FP&A, SNOP, supply chain suites. These systems were known for macro planning. Once they had done their macro planning, day by day interaction or transactions were processed inside the ERP system. But in our mind, when we look at the real power of AI native or agentic workflow, I think the autonomous macro planning is where we are going to see a lot more changes, because they don't have the same relational constraints that ERP systems need. So we have one question here. So Srista, I think you are asking from the buyer's perspective, do you think AI native will reduce traditional ERP configuration? Well, so I think that's a very interesting question. Okay. So if you buy AI native category, okay, obviously the effort is going to be lower because they are very different the way they are implemented. But are you going to get everything that you traditionally got from ERP is going to be a question from the business value perspective, depending upon how you define it, right? So, and depending upon how you define your implementation configuration as well, if you're looking at the initial configuration, then the effort might not be as much. So again, it's very hard to compare at this point of time which one is going to be faster. But for the most part, the way AI native vendors are claiming, obviously they are far faster from the implementation configuration perspective. But the traditional vendors are going to implement these workflows as well as part of their solution. They might not be completely re-architected, rewired, but they will get some speed as part of their workflows as well.
Okay.
Okay, any follow-ups there by any chance? No?
No. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I would say their current standing, and we are talking about AI native platforms. So the current standing, I mean, where they are really penetrating the market is they are limited to accounting and bookkeeping. They have not done the real ERP workloads. We have not seen them appear or being demanded by customers in our ERP engagements or selection engagements at this point of time. The majority of the use cases that we have seen, these are very siloed use cases. They are primarily focused in the services-centric industries, and if they are present in product-centric industries, their scope is limited at this point of time. Overall, from the capabilities maturity perspective, they are really lean. From the operational capabilities perspective, obviously, all of the AI native vendors are going to argue that whatever we could develop, we are, exposing the same layer. And again, this is the same pitch that the majority of the ERP vendors had. So you can develop these features overnight as well. Obviously, it's mind blowing the kind of capabilities that these systems have developed in the last 3-4 months. So obviously you can do that as well. But again, how effective you are going to be with that strategy is going to define how successful you will be. But again, our biggest concern that we have on these AI native categories, whether they will replace ERP as a category or not, or whether they are going to disrupt the market of those three bigger categories, is going to be the constraints that they don't have at the data model level. And there is a very good chance that all of these AI native vendors may remain more in the business suite market. Business suite vendors have struggled overall in penetrating the bigger market so far. They have not been as successful as what some people claim. Okay, so we have one more comment here. So Sharon is asking, Sam, speed is great, but what are the non-negotiables you put in place to protect data integrity early, especially around master data, posting logic, and audit trails before automation or AI accelerates the workflow? So great question, Sharon. Thank you so much for asking that. So I would say when you look at the value of ERP, the non-negotiables that you are asking, ERP systems had this inbuilt with them. Obviously, you still needed user maturity to some degree, but they had a lot of these business rules and constraints built as part of their process flows, as well as data constraints, and that's why you didn't have as much data integrity issues as you are going to find with the slightly leaner systems. For example, business suites is a category that I was referring to, or accounting systems, that's where you have a lot more challenges. So the question is going to be, okay, do you want to do this more from the system perspective, or do you want to do this more from the manual process perspective? Now, AI throws another curveball here, because obviously AI is going to rely on a lot of things that you have underneath. So, but AI is going to be far more intelligent as well in detecting these anomalies, in asking you to approve these workflows. But again, depending upon how much work it is going to generate. Even within ERP systems, when you implement, I mean, just implementing the ERP system may cause a lot more work in terms of variances. So if we are looking at this more from that lens, is that, okay, these AI agents are going to propose so many different anomalies, and then you are probably going to require thousands of accountants just to resolve those anomalies. So where is the speed? So again, it would depend upon the implementation configuration and how you are going to attack this. But overall, you are going to get a lot more power, I would say, from the AI native workflows perspective. So hopefully that answers your question, Sharon. If you have any follow-up question, I can answer that. Okay, so overall, where are you going to see the architectural shifts? I would say. So I think we have been touching on some of these topics, but for the most part, what you are going to see is some of the transactional logic is going to move to the orchestration layer. And this is going to be a change in the scope of ERP, how we are going to recognize ERP and how we are going to perceive the ERP. That's where you are going to see a lot more changes. Obviously, vendors are going to make changes as well as we see the category alignment in the market. Once some of these analyst firms also build a consensus in terms of what is AI native, what is workflow orchestration, what is going to be the net new ERP, we don't know at this point of time. Okay, the other line where you are going to see a lot more blurring lines is going to be between FP&A as well as ERP. Just because now ERPs don't have the same challenges that we had in the past. They are much easier overall from the database rules perspective, because AI native categories have removed all of those rules. And that's why now what you can do is you can do some very similar things as what you could do inside FP&A. And if you ask any finance person, they all loved FP&A products. And the reason why they loved it is because they didn't have the same constraint that ERP systems proposed. So now integration, migration, overall usage is going to be much easier. So now the question is going to be, do we really need FP&A? Probably not. Okay, but there is a AI native FP&A category as well. There are some vendors. We just have one major vendor right now that is heavily invested. So we don't know at this point of time, what's going to happen to that category. But there is a clear blurred line between ERP and FP&A, and there is a very good chance that ERPs might consume the FP&A market completely. They were doing that in terms of the, I would say, acquisition and consolidation perspective, but for the most part, those workloads were fairly disconnected from the interaction perspective. But now we are going to have the real technology integration between these two platforms. Now, ERP layers, are they going to be relevant? Is going to be a question. So that's going to be a question for all of us. I think that's what we are going to watch in the future years. So that's it for this one. Okay, how to reassess your business model? Again, you are going to see a lot of changes in your business model as well. Once you figure out, okay, how you are going to incorporate AI in your products, machines, whatever you are building, services you are delivering, you are going to have AI workflows, and that is going to change, rewire the complete state of your organizational design, ERP. So you need to figure out, okay, how your net new version is going to be. And once you define that, then you will be able to figure out what technology you are going to need and how technology is going to help with that. So how do you do that? How do you assess your business model? You need to watch your competitors. Okay, what your competitors are doing, how they are incorporating AI workflows from the customer experience perspective, service delivery, whatever they might be doing, you need to watch that, because that's going to dictate your the definition of your industry, your business model, organizational design. Some of the macro trends. Okay, whatever challenges that you are facing from the macro trend perspective, if AI can help overcome that, then it could be a possibility that you probably need to assess that as well, that maybe AI could play a role there. Industry trends, you need to watch that as well. And that could be one other way how you can reassess your business model if you need to make any sort of changes at this point of time. And obviously the organizational state as well. You need to assess that And you might be able to hire some companies who might be able to help with these exercises if you want. How to reassess your current architecture. So one thing you need to redefine is which is going to be AI redefined workflows, and how much AI you are going to have in your process flows, what AI is going to do versus what you are going to do, what is going to be roles and responsibilities. So again, you need to do as is in to be process design and figure out, how you are going to build those AI enabled workflows, whether you are going to have a human in the loop or they are going to be completely autonomous. That's completely your choice. But you have to redefine your business model, rewire everything, how you perform your work, how you deliver your products and services right now. And once you have that, then the second thing that you need to do is, are you going to buy or build? Now, building is much easier as well. It's not as expensive as it used to be. We don't have the same constraints that were there 10 years back. So there's a possibility that you might be able to build some of these AI technologies as well. Some companies are doing that. So that's where you need to make a decision whether this is going to be AI custom development, AI augmented system, or completely AI native. So that's how you would define your architecture. Um, some of the selection risks that you need to be aware of. So obviously we have very new vendors at this point of time. They are not as proven overall from their market penetration perspective. So you need to be careful. You need to watch a little bit before you jump on that. And then over customizability is going to be another risk that you need to be aware of. AI is producing a lot of code. You need to have some sort of governance processes to be able to figure out, okay, how you are going to control, how you are going to maintain. Creating is easy, maintaining that is very hard. So that's where you need to figure out how you are going to do that. Again, AI is going to help to some degree from the maintainability perspective as well, because you have several different tools and technologies in the market that can help you with that. But again, the more you are going to create, the more problems you are going to create for yourself as well. Data integrity risks, those are real. Again, it's not one-to-one comparison right now when you compare any of the AI native systems or categories with the mainstream ERP systems. So you need to understand what are going to be those risks, and if they are going to be a problem for your current architecture or for your business model at this point of time. Master data governance is going to be another factor. Again, the more disconnected workloads you are going to have, the more challenges you are going to face from the master data governance perspective. One thing that people are not realizing, you can shove as much AI as you like, but whatever you are putting, AI obviously is learning from your proprietary data, and sometimes that could be competitive data, your own data. So you need to be careful when you are assessing these technologies, what they are doing internally, what is their bill of material, and I'm talking about software bill of material, what technologies they are using internally to be able to deliver these capabilities, and how they are interacting with other LLMs and how they are using that data. I think that's where you would need a lot of visibility, or you might run into some of the legal risks. And then obviously you are going to have some of the future migration challenges as well. You can take off all of those database constraints, relational layers at this point of time. But let's say tomorrow, if you don't like them and you want to migrate to some of these mainstream ERP system, the data migration is going to be far more expensive, far more difficult overall in the future. So that is something you need to keep in mind. Next step for ERP buyers. So I would say develop a better understanding of the AI landscape. So understand, how AI is evolving from your industry perspective, as well as the other technologies that are available. Then you need to audit your current business process as well and develop the cohesive transformation strategy rather than just going after any sort of AI native technologies. Develop the strategy looking at pretty much everything, process data, the whole governance processes as well, and then figure out, okay, which components need to be replaced and how you are going to deliver those components, whether they are going to be built by whatever you are going to do with that. And again, you need to figure out the AI native architecture as well as the system risks. So that is going to be another thing that you need to pay attention to substantially. I would say there is a lot of noise in the market, and because of that, you might have challenges. align your business model and architecture with the new changes. You need to do that. Don't implement AI without a compelling business case. That's given. Business case is not optional. You still need to have the business case in terms of how AI is going to deliver business value. And sometimes companies are simply jumping on this, and they are getting bad taste in their mouth. So again, the fundamentals have not changed in how you would implement the software. It's just that technology is far more capable. And obviously, you can engage with one of the independent ERP consulting firm. They can help with all of this, depending upon how mature and comprehensive their capabilities are. So we have some more, questions here I'm going to cover, and if not, then we can simply wrap. I'm going to pause for a second. Shasta, do you have any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I just think that these AI native platforms have the potential to give you the desired results, but only when, like the ERP buyers will stay disciplined about their data governance, integrity, and what will fit in a long-term way, I think. Because I feel like this is a very um, early stage to totally depend on it and expect that it would work out.
Exactly. The only challenge that we have right now is we just don't have enough time because AI is moving very fast. Technology is evolving. Business models are evolving. So obviously, you need to move fast, but the fundamentals have not changed, as you correctly pointed out. That you need to figure out, what your organizational design is going to be, how your business processes are going to look, and then really assess how AI is going to help depending upon where you fit in AI, whether it's going to be just in the workflow orchestration layer, it's going to be a net new ERP, or any other categories that you are trying to replace. So again, the comprehensive analysis is not optional. You have to go through that. More comments, questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Let's see if we have anything else from the audience. I'll wait just for a minute. If you guys have anything, I can cover that, or we can simply wrap. Okay, thank you so much, James. Glad that you liked it. Okay, so we have one question from Sharon. So Sharon is asking, okay, any advice how to manage your ongoing change business process? So again, Sharon, I think I don't know whether you are asking this more from the AI lenses, or is this more of the general question? So maybe if you have a follow-up there, I can address that. But for the most part, the way you need to approach these changes is you need to analyze comprehensively. Obviously, you need to look at the impact across the board, whether you are looking at business processes, data. But sometimes, especially how SaaS has penetrated the market, we are making decisions at the departmental level. So we just don't have the same control that traditionally we used to have. So again, if you're looking at the cross-functional, obviously that has to be done more in the central manner. You need to have some sort of COE or IT department or whatever you want to call that. But that effort has to be centralized. Every single change that you are making, you need to analyze across the architecture and figure out, okay, if you make this change, what are we going to impact? And this is given for any sort of AI-based changes as well. If you're making those changes, you have to analyze everything and rewire. Obviously, that takes a little bit of time, but you need to assess that. So I don't know, Sharon, if that answers your question. If you have any sort of follow-ups, I can answer that. Okay, perfect. Okay, anything else, guys? All right, perfect, guys. So thank you so much for joining. I think that's a wrap. We'll bring more webinars in the future. So stay tuned for those sessions. And again, the best way to get to know about those would be on our events and webinar page. That's number one. Number two, if you have not subscribed to our newsletter, you might want to do that. That's where we announce these things. Or you can also follow us on LinkedIn. Follow me. Generally, we have a lot of announcements there as well. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I'll see you in the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.